Happy Pride, everyone! Let's talk about some more gay characters. Last week we did the L's, this week we're doing the G's. I feel like everyone can figure out the concept. But once again, we're only covering characters from the main continuity, that is 616, who have been explicitly confirmed on page. My apologies to all of the X-Men, but simply having conjoining rooms and daydreaming about seeing each other in a Speedo is not gonna cut it. Okay, one quick variant. There is a universe where Wolverine is gay and is dating Hercules. I knew if I didn't mention it, someone would get mad at me, so there you go. But honestly, we don't have to scrub through the multiverse to find relevant queer characters, not when 616 is home to people like Venomm. What do you mean 2 M's? Yes, this poor soul, doomed to disappoint everyone in every room he walks into for the rest of his life, is not a big gooey symbiote, he's a snake boy with a messed up face. He was a part of Killmonger's attempted overthrow of Wakanda back in the 70s. It didn't go great and he ended up in prison where he developed feelings for one of T'Challa's lead advisors, Taku. Now, Don McGregor has said that he created both characters with the express intention of having them fall in love, only he never got the green light because, say it with me now, censorship is annoying! Though in 2022, it was finally confirmed that the pair had run off together, retired, and married. Now, no disrespect to the Snake or his charmer, but if it took 50 years to confirm a couple of nobodies were queer, imagine what it's like for the popular people. Bobby Drake, aka Iceman, was introduced in 1963 and firmly established as the first person to think Jean Grey was overrated, but his own sexuality wouldn't be confirmed until 2014, after he'd already dated a lot of women. So was the retcon stupid? Was it just compulsive heterosexuality, or is he bi? Honestly, the only way to tell a character's sexuality is by what they say and who they date. So unless otherwise stated, if you would prefer to think any of the characters I'm talking about are bi, all it's going to affect is my theming. But the thing is, with Iceman, it is otherwise stated. His perceived interest in women was a performance. Heck, the only reason he even gets outed is because Jean sees through him trying to catcall magic. And honestly, it's not like there weren't signs. His stories over the years involve things like needing to accept himself to reach his true power, bringing Rogue home to pretend to be his girlfriend around his bigoted parents, and assuming that Jean knew why he wasn't like other guys way back in the 90s. Which, of course, she evidently did, but still. It was about as obvious to everyone paying attention as it was to Judah Miller. Judah would go on to be his first grown-up same-sex relationship because every hero has to date a civilian eventually, though they did suffer from the same classic problem: long distance. Judah lived in California. Now, I say grown-up relationship because while Bobby did come out as a teenager, it was a teenage version of him that had been brought into the present by Beast because nothing can ever be simple. This older, young version of Bobby briefly dated an Inhuman named Romeo. He was cool, had like empathy powers, but then Inhumans vs. X-Men popped off and his name became a lot more topical. Don't worry though, they shunted him off to an alternate dimension so he could age up to something more appropriate. That red man he's bursting out of, by the way, is Christian Frost, another one of Bobby's exes. They dated during the Krakoan era when Bobby served on the Marauders and Christian was the White Bishop of the Hellfire Trading Company. Despite being Emma Frost's little brother, he is neither a telepath nor a living disco ball. Instead, his thing is astral energy manipulation, which he can use to shoot, make projections, and yes, encase old lovers for a juicy reveal. Their relationship fizzled out because Bobby moved to California. Though, of course, movie fans would kill me if I didn't mention Bobby's brief relationship with fellow Marauder, Pyro. In the comics, St. John Allardyce was a member of Mystique's Brotherhood and a romance novelist who— different Pyro? Oh, yeah, sorry. The other way Marvel likes to canonize their old characters is just by making new ones. So years after Pyro died from the legacy virus, a metaphor for the AIDS epidemic, we were introduced to Simon Lasker, who can actually make fire, not just control it. He was a part of Mesmero's Brotherhood, but eventually defected to the X-Men, where he and Iceman had a one-night stand. In a similar boat, Juggernaut might be willing to jump into the ocean for and raise a kid with Black Tom Cassidy, but that's just cause they're like the bestest of buddies. It's Kid Juggernaut who's gay. Real name Jin Jun Sung, but more commonly called Justin, he is empowered by a fragment of the same gem that made Cain Marko so swole. In fact, Cain actually killed his grandfather to win favor with the god doling out the powers. Never forget, Juggernaut is a warlock. Anyway, spilt milk and all that, little Juggy spends his time these days as a part of Avengers Academy, where he once had a crush on fellow teammate Aaron Fisher, aka Captain America of the Railways. Didn't know they had subdivisions? Well, they do. It's called the Captain Network. It's not not an official organization, but just a lot of people who have taken up the mantle to defend their specific communities. In Aaron's case, after running away from home, he became a wanderer in Las Vegas. When he learned that other unhoused kids were disappearing off the street, he took on his new identity, tracked the culprits down, and helped the kids escape. Then he started riding around on train cars, helping out anyone he came across until he got recruited by the Academy. There he had a run-in with Mysteriant, who, despite what it sounds like, is not a variant from the Spider-Ham universe. That's Mysterio! Get cultured! No, I'm talking about Quentin Beck's cousin, Quarry, who used his tech to start Robin Hooding all over town. And I guess the fishbowl was compulsory. When Aaron found him stealing insulin, HRT, and PrEP, he didn't so much stop the alleged crime as help out, which was good, because it turned out they'd already met each other earlier that night in their civilian identities at the Arnie Roth Community Center. Who was Arnie Roth? Well, you know how in the movies, before Cap had the serum, he had Bucky to back him up? In the books, he had Arnie, who might just be Marvel's first openly gay character ever. He first appeared in 1982, when some villains threatened to kill his partner Michael if he didn't help lure Captain America into a trap. He almost went through with it, but once a bodyguard, always a bodyguard, and he just couldn't bring himself to put little Stevie in danger. Not being at all little anymore, Cap was like, nah, it's fine, and just sorta handled the whole situation almost instantly. Which was great, but largely irrelevant, as Michael ended up dying a few issues later anyway. Arnie stuck around, popping up now and again, and even becoming the Avengers publicist for a bit, but sadly, not being a super soldier, he was not immune to being almost 100 years old. He ended up passing away from cancer, and Cap dedicated the community center to him to ensure that he would never be forgotten. Which is more than can be said for other World War II era characters like the Destroyer. Brian Falsworth was the son of Union Jack, basically the Captain America of England. What about Captain Britain? He's a multiversal magical boy living in fairyland and not gay. We're talking about Jack right now. Brian, whatever. He served in the war alongside his boyfriend, Roger. Then, in shocking, unprecedented events, one of them became a super soldier while the other was tortured and got a nice brain scrub. Brian took on the name Destroyer while Roger was called Dyna-Mite on account of now being only a foot tall. That was a bit demoralizing, so when they met back up, Brian gave his badass name to Roger and took on his father's for himself. Roger decided to stay and fight behind enemy lines, while Brian joined the horribly named Invaders, where, fun fact, he gained electricity powers after a skirmish with Thor. Which, yes, you're putting the pieces together correctly, means Thor was working for the Mustache Man. And I know what you're wondering. Who are the oldest gay characters in universe? Well, I'll tell ya. It's Vin and Brrkk, a couple of cave dudes from 1 million BC. Brrkk is largely irrelevant aside from the fact that he loved Vin and died tragically, because we were still burying our gays in the Pleistocene epoch. This motivated Vin to become the original Starbrand, which is a fancy cosmic planetary defense thing, and guys, to be honest, it made him the Hulk. That doesn't mean all Starbrands are Hulks, but they were trying to do a whole Stone Age Avengers and someone needed to argue with the Thor analog over who's stronger. Said analog, by the way, was Odin, who was probably queer, given, you know, mythology, but we're sticking to Marvel canon. So let's talk about the morally superior X-Men, but just for a second. This team originally started out as a support group for superpowered trans youth, and we'll discuss them a little bit more in a few weeks, but right now I just want to highlight their founder, D-Man. Real name Dennis Dunphy, D-Man is not trans, but was confirmed gay back in 2016. He's always been obsessed with superheroes, so when he became an adult, he paid a visit to the power broker and became a professional wrestler. A completely sound and logical career move that was only ruined by the fact that, surprise, the power broker was evil. When Captain America showed up to shut them down, Dennis jumped in to help, creating a costume that was, let's say, loosely inspired by Wolverine and Daredevil. He and Cap went on to work together a lot. At one point, Dennis was even the first draft pick for a new Avengers team. But his life was never easy. On top of the usual brainwashing, vampirification, and death most heroes face, he also underwent homelessness and suffered from schizophrenia. But it's all worked out. He settled down, adopted a teleporting dog, and even has a Lego special that rocks. Speaking of movies and rocks, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention everyone's favorite rhinestone revolutionary, Korg. Now, he might not be as silly as he is in the films, but if you've seen Ragnarok, you kinda get the gist. He's a Cronin, which is like an interstellar ripoff of Ben Grimm, who befriended Hulk when they were in prison together as gladiators on Sokovia. car. They worked to overthrow the planet and then came back to Earth to make it everyone else's problem. Not entirely unjustified, the Illuminati did shoot Hulk into space. Now, Cronins are an all-male species that reproduce basically by chilling in lava pits until their parts start to meld together, a process that Korg had hoped to undergo with Hiroim the Old Strong, a fellow gladiator who was not made of rocks. How that would have exactly worked is not clear because Hiroim ended up giving his life to save some humans, which Korg found to be sort of annoying. But hey, at least the movie version has Dave, always a chance he ends up in the books. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time they pulled from other media. Take Morph from X-Men the Animated Series. Now, technically, he is based on an old 60s character called the Changeling, who had a total of 10 appearances before the show, but really, he was only included to die and add some dramatic weight. The issue was, he was so popular that not only did they bring him back as a series regular, but they repeatedly tried to retrofit him into the books. Most notably, a variant of him served on the multiversal team The Exiles, but most forgettably, there was a whole other kid named Benjamin. This Morph was a student at a real school before getting expelled for being a mutant and relocating to the Xavier Institute, which was basically all phys ed all the time. Eventually, he developed feelings for fellow student Nathaniel Carver, aka Hindsight, who had the power to see brief psychic imprints whenever he touched someone or something. I assume the two bonded over not being very helpful in a fight. Now, some of you may have noticed that this list is heavily skewed towards mutants. That is because the closest thing any X-Man gets to straight is waiting in line to be confirmed as something else. So it's fitting that Marvel's first openly gay superhero was a mutant by the name of Jean-Paul Beaubier, aka Northstar. One of Marvel's few speedsters, he originally served on Alpha Flight alongside his long-lost twin sister Aurora, whom he met for the first time when they both joined the team. Fun fact, when they touch hands, they gain the ability to beam light at people. What does that have to do with super speed? Shut up! Now, even before coming out, Northstar had a solid claim to being Marvel's, if not comics in general's, first gay superhero. It was his creator's intention since the 70s, and they weren't exactly subtle, but it was still a long road filled with questionable decisions before he actually got to say the words, "I'm gay," which he famously delivered mid-punch. This was part of a controversial story that saw Northstar adopt an abandoned baby only to find out that she was HIV positive. Thanks to his celebrity status, she became a media darling, hailed as an innocent victim of the epidemic. This enraged a former superhero named Major Mapleleaf, who attacked the hospital. Turns out his son, Michael Sadler, had died from AIDS without any such sympathy because he was gay and therefore not seen as innocent. Northstar's mid-punch proclamation was an attempt at showing that he empathized with the Major's feelings. It didn't go over super great, as the Major just then blamed him for not going ahead and normalizing being gay earlier, but when Northstar's daughter also succumbs to the disease, both men stop fighting and share in each other's grief. Now, I wanted to include Michael because he represents a large chunk of Marvel's queer representation. Tragedy. There are a lot of characters whose stories are devastating, like Jonas Graymalkin, a child in the 1700s who was buried alive by his own father after getting caught kissing a boy in the family barn, or Jumbo Carnation, a mutant fashion designer who was killed in a hate crime on the streets of New York City's mutant town, or even more personal tragedies like Carl Valentino, who got to grow old and die peacefully but never was able to come out of the closet and live as his true self. And while it is important to shed light on some of these, in the spirit of pride and happiness and not making this video an endless cascade of depression, I've decided to mainly focus on those who get happy endings. Like Graymalkin, whose mutant powers kicked in and kept him alive, allowing him to resurface in the present day where he attended the Xavier Institute. He even made it to the island paradise of Krakoa, where he trained under Bishop and started dating fellow mutant Dallas Gibson. Jonas's powers only work in the dark, and Dallas has a living shadow, so match made in a very dim heaven. Krakoa also went on to resurrect both Jumbo and Carl. The former went on to achieve even wider fame as the designer behind the Hellfire Gala and date a very nice lighthouse keeper, while the latter came back not as he was, but as a young man. Adopting the name Somnus, he not only got a second chance to live as a gay man, but also as a superhero. He lent his dream powers to Kate Pryde's Marauders, where he served alongside a man he once had a one-night stand with. We'll get back to Akiro next week. Even Northstar went on to join the X-Men and eventually got together with a PR agent his sister hired, Kyle Jinadu. Another regular human, they also had to deal with the dreaded long distance. The X-Men were based in California, but they made it work, and in 2012, 20 years after Northstar came out, the two were married in Marvel's first ever gay wedding. The mutants have given Marvel a lot of firsts when it comes to queer rep, like Darnell Wade, their first drag queen superhero. Inspired out of universe by various contestants on RuPaul's Drag Race, and in universe by the flamboyant, brightly colored heroes of New York City, Darnell adopted the drag persona of Shade. Her power was similar to Cloak's, being able to teleport and create portals using the Dark Force dimension, which they originally used for a shopping spree, like we all would. But eventually they decided to only use their powers to spread light and joy, adopting a new name, Darkviel. Mutants also gave Marvel their first on-page kiss between two men, namely Rictor and Shatterstar. Now, these two are probably the greatest representation of the bi-lemma I talked about earlier, so if you want to view them both as gay or both as bi, that's fine. But the general consensus seems to be Rictor is gay and Shatterstar is bi, which is great for me because it means I get to go another week without having to explain how the Shatinator is his own granddad. Anyways, Rictor is the king of vibes, the seismic kind, not the chill kind. He's honestly not that chill. Basically, he can make earthquakes, and he was first introduced as one of the kids X-Factor found when they were pretending to be mutant hunters. Don't ask, they were being dumb. But eventually filtered into the New Mutants, which became X-Force, which became just a series of nonsense. On Krakoa, he got really into magic thanks to the new mentorship of Apocalypse, always a great idea, and became more of your standard earthbender. Though, I'm sorry, I do have to say, this is not the first gay kiss in Marvel. It's called that, sure, but it's from 2009, 8 years after Mickey Tork made out with his boyfriend that surely had a name, though it is known only to God. And listen, was Mickey introduced in the previous issue? Yes. Did he die literally 10 pages later? You better believe he did. Is this anywhere as significant or groundbreaking as 2 decades-old characters finally acknowledging their feelings for each other? Do not be outside of your mind. However, who would I be if I let something as meaningful as that get in the way of being overly pedantic? Point goes to Mickey. Now, this was a part of X-Statix, or I guess technically at the time it was still X-Force, but like I said, nonsense. It was sort of the reality TV version of the X-Men with a much more comedic and satirical approach, which meant characters got killed off. A lot. Some other members included Vivisector, a former Harvard professor named Miles Alfred who came down with a bad case of slightly lamer lycanthropy, and Phat, a trailer park kid named Billy Bob Riley who realized he could shift his weight around to enlarge different parts of his body. As you can see, we're not exactly dealing with the A-listers. Part of that is because X-Statix was never about anything as trivial as peace for mutant kind. They were after fame and money, which is why these two tried to boost their publicity by pretending to be gay, though their fake relationship fizzled out when they each realized that not only were they actually gay, but they had no romantic interest in each other. That's just life, you know? But jokes aside, the most prominent gay mutant of the modern age is probably a Knoll. Originally a part of Academy X, he's a little lizard boy who has a power that keeps me up at night. They took his arm off, right? And then he grew a new one that was all big and even more lizardy, and the immediate response was, okay, rip off the other one and balance yourself out. That's wrong. That's a dumb approach. Rip off the same one and see what happens. Is it fixed? Is it the same? Is it worse? Like, bud, yeah, you can sniff the air with your tongue. Cool. But I feel like your real power might be a horrifying, eldritch, hyper-evolved monster body. Just keep yanking. Anyways, he's kind of been trapped as the young gay kid since he premiered, as he was originally classmates with Laura Kinney, then 20 years later on Krakoa, he was still classmates with her little sister. It wasn't until last year that he seemed to graduate to the same vague 20-something as the rest of his peers. Around then, he started showing interest in Indra, an Indian mutant who also confuses me. Only because Indra, the god, presumably also exists, right? Like Odin and all them do. And it's not like the kid has weather powers or anything. He's got a big purple exoskeleton. Just kind of feels like taking a random Norwegian boy with acid spit and calling him Thor, you know? But regardless, he was confirmed to be gay last year because they really are all just in a line. Though that's not to say we're not still getting new queer representation. Recently, we were introduced to Kobach Neverheld, a member of the Iraqi. a group of mutants who evolved over thousands of years in an alternate hell dimension and now occupy the planet once called Mars. His power is producing bone-like quills on his back and just generally looking like a beast. He may also be an Omega-level mutant, if that matters to you, though just how the Iraqi define the term isn't quite clear. He took the name Never Held after his first lover, Tarlo, was killed, though confusingly he vowed to never cry again. He's definitely still held. Even more recently, there's Ben Liu over in the current X-Men run, who was originally a regular dude before getting experimented on by a group called 3K and seemingly being turned into a mutant. Now he has the ability to create lifelike illusions and flirt with Magneto, who, by the way, is not on this list. Neither is Charles, and honestly, that annoys me to no end. But it is time to move on from the X-Men, I know, only 40 in, and focus on the Gay-Lesbian Alliance. Or, sorry, the Great Lakes Avengers. Honest mistake. That is the second most embarrassing mistake Miguel Santos ever made. The first, of course, happened after his parents built a very strange machine. It was designed to see a world unseen, but when Hulk smashed it up, they just quit, so Miguel went out to take a look at it. It was a great big flash, everything changed, his molecules got all rearranged, and he was reborn as living lightning. The process made him go a little bit insane, and he ended up fighting the West Coast Avengers, but don't worry, he eventually switched sides and joined the team. Now, the GLA may not actually be the Gay-Lesbian Alliance, but it is led by a gay man, namely Dr. Val Ventura, aka Flatman. Except not really, his name is Matt. The whole doctor bit was an attempt at copying Reed Richards, because, if you couldn't tell, Flatman is a not-so-subtle parody of Mr. Fantastic. In universe, he actually used to impersonate him at birthday parties working for his boyfriend, Andrew. Only Matt wasn't satisfied pretending. He wanted to be a real superhero and for Andrew to join him as his sidekick, Paperboy. The two ended up breaking up, but Matt always kept the door open. Also, it wasn't crazy. On top of being able to flatten himself, he does genuinely have stretchy powers. How? He's a mutant. You thought we were done? Okay, I promise there are non-mutant gay people in Marvel Comics, like Ra's Malhotra. He's just got a fancy suit that gives him access to Pym particles so he can be a big boy. Born to Indian immigrants, I'm honestly surprised he got to go by Giant Man and not like Hanuman. Eventually, he joined the Agents of Atlas, Marvel's premier Asian-led team, where he started a relationship with Isaac Ikeda, aka the Protector. His thing is being a knight that fights dragons. About it. He showed up when they were fighting a dragon. He kept showing up because they kept fighting dragons. Don't ask him anything else. He just cares about dragons. And Roz. Oh, and at one point, Roz stayed at an apartment that was once owned by Samuel Saxon, aka the Machinesmith. Yeah, good segue. Pulling a rare reverse Pinocchio, real boy Sammy Saxon chose to become an artificial life form after uploading his consciousness into a robo body. From there, he just sorta became generic brand Ultron, uploading his consciousness into newer and fancier tech and sending robots out to annoy superheroes. He did briefly work for Ant-Man, hence the apartment, but he is a villain through and through, though he does seem to have a crush on Vision. Do with that information as you will. Speaking of gay evil people, let's talk about the ethical ramifications of monster hunting in a world where you could reasonably come across a pack of monsters grabbing matcha from the local coffee shop. Cullen Bloodstone is the youngest of the famed Bloodstone family. When he was 11, his father took him to the Black Realm of Clintor for some wholesome family bonding that included leaving him there overnight. Except, whoopsies, Daddy ended up dying and he stayed there for over 2 years. By the time he got back, the hunter had become the monster. That's called poetry, babes. He was one of the kids Arcane abducted to try and bank on the success of Hunger Games, but before you feel too much sympathy, he was most recently shown trying to fox hunt mutants. But not all gay evil people are rich and annoying, some are just trying to make ends meet, like Joe the Gorilla and Sweet William, who I'm gonna be honest, I picked for this solely based off their names. These are two low-level goons from the 70s. Joe was your typical bruiser with a specialty in choking, while William was a laid-back, anti-violent gunman. Do you not see the nuance there? The potential? They may have only been in a combined 4 issues, but I think we can all agree there's room for growth, especially when you add in Joe having to quit the hench life after getting diagnosed with leukemia and then getting beaten up so bad by Moon Knight that he was permanently hospitalized. Before you start judging Mark Steven Jake too harshly, it was an imposter. The real Moon Knight is an ally. In fact, one of Marvel's most prolific specific gay characters is a part of his supporting cast. Jean-Paul Duchamp, better known as Frenchy, has been by Mark's side since long before he started yelling about the moon. In fact, he was there the day that happened, and they both premiered in the same issue. That's what you call a day one, folks. Since then, he's mainly served as Mark's pilot, but has gone on to do a lot of random things, including run a restaurant with his business and life partner, Rob Silverman, who also doubled as Moon Knight's physical therapist until that became the problem it obviously was. And that concludes our list. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe and comment down below, and I'm kidding, I wouldn't forget them. In a move that I freely admit was a desperate attempt at engagement bait, I have saved the most popular gay couple to the very end. Let's talk about the Kings of Space. Wiccan and Hulkling first met while serving on the Young Avengers, which is a little funny because despite clearly being intended as the Thor parallel, Wiccan's powers are magic, and he is the reincarnated son of Avengers, Wanda Maximoff, and the Vision. Usually I'd say we don't have time, but they made 2 TV shows and a movie about this, so I think you get it. Hulkling, also not a Hulk. He is instead half Kree and half Skrull, which, if you know anything about the galactopolitical standing of Marvel's cosmic empires, is kinda insane. He became a unifying force for the warring kingdoms, eventually becoming the leader of both. This is how we get to Kings of Space, though technically, even though they are married, Billy is actually the prince consort of space. Doesn't roll off the tongue as well. But it should be said, this video is coming out at the same time as Jonathan Hickman's Imperial, which promises to shake up the galactopolitical standing of Marvel's cosmic empires. So we'll see where they are next month. Anyways, that does genuinely conclude our list. If you liked it, make sure to leave a comment down below and subscribe to see the rest. And if you didn't, lie. I'm a very sensitive man.